Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a massive industry-wide shift that's fundamentally changing how you identify and handle refrigerant cylinders on the job. Look, for decades, techs out in the field relied on this color-coded system that honestly just got more and more complex and, frankly, a lot more dangerous. So we're going to break down this critical transition away from those legacy paint colors and really explore the new rules of engagement for refrigerant safety.
It really brings up a serious question, right? What happens when the exact visual cues designed to keep you safe actually start causing more confusion than clarity? I mean, for those of you out there servicing and repairing HVACR equipment every day, you absolutely know the frustration. It used to be totally standard practice to just grab a tank based on pure muscle memory and a quick glance at the paint shop. But man, as the sheer number of refrigerants on the market exploded, relying on cylinder color literally turned into a very real hazard.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Today's explainer was broken down into 5 key areas. We're going to cover the historical rainbow of confusion, the new gray-green standard, labels and flammable markings, the anatomy of a cylinder, and finally, safe recovery practices. So, moving on to Section 1, the rainbow of confusion. Let's look at exactly when, and honestly why, those old legacy color codes totally failed us. Originally, under AHRI Guideline N, every single refrigerant had its own unique paint color. Think, light green for R22. But as a flood of new refrigerants hit the market, we simply ran out of distinct colors. Imagine being on a dimly lit job site. The rose color of R410A and the light purple of R502 became virtually impossible to tell apart. And the numbers back this up. Over half of technicians surveyed actually reported that container colors were directly causing them confusion. And in this line of work, a visual mix-up like that, it can lead to catastrophic safety failures.
Okay, Section 2, the gray-green standard. This is all about uniformity for safety.
Realizing that the whole rainbow system was completely broken, the AHRI published a major revision to Guideline N back in 2017. And the new rule? It's pretty straightforward. All new refrigerant containers, excluding recovered refrigerants of course, must transition to one single, uniform, light gray-green paint color. Officially, that's designated as RAL 7044. It is a brilliant shift from this chaotic rainbow of tanks to just one consistent, safe line of standard containers.
Now, obviously, this wasn't an overnight switch, but January 2020, that was the target date set by the AHRI for all new containers to adopt this uniform gray-green color. And hey, while it's technically a voluntary guideline here in the US, the major cylinder manufacturers have widely adopted it, which means this is exactly what you're seeing at the supply house right now. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, because the cylinders basically all look identical now, the printed product label is absolutely your single source of truth. It completely overrides any muscle memory you might have from the old colors. You literally can't just reach for the rose tank anymore. You've got to stop, read the actual label, and verify the contents. Now, the AHRI does still assign specific Pantone colors, but those are strictly for printed materials, like the container label and the outer packaging. The tank itself, gray-green.
Moving right along to Section 3, labels and flammable markings. Here's how we navigate A2L risks.
First up, let's make sure we're clear on definitions. Class 4 refrigerants are the ones that receive a flammability rating of 2, 2L, or 3 in the ANSI/ASHRAE Standard 34. And look, with the HVAC world rapidly shifting toward refrigerants with low global warming potential, these A2L class refrigerants, they're here to stay. But they bring entirely new, high-stakes flammability risks to the job. In fact, according to Transport Canada and DOT regulations, when you're moving these around, you are officially handling dangerous, flammable goods.
So how exactly are you supposed to identify them on a standard gray-green cylinder? Well, there are mandatory visual cues you need to look out for. Any flammable compound or mixture absolutely must have a red band clearly painted on the shoulder or the top of the container. Plus, and this is a big one, to physically stop you from accidentally hooking up a flammable tank to a non-flammable system, A2L cylinders use left-hand thread connections. These aren't just suggestions, they're literally life-saving engineering controls designed to stop a disaster before it even starts.
All right, Section 4, Anatomy of a Cylinder. Let's talk about reading the metal.
Because beyond just the paint and the sticker, you really need to know how to read the physical metal of the tank itself. Stamped right into the color of every legal cylinder is a ton of required data. It's basically a built-in cheat sheet. You're not just looking at random serial numbers here. You've got to identify the DOT specifications to know your design pressure. You also need to find the tar weight, usually marked with a TW, which tells you the empty cylinder weight, and of course, locate the requalification date. And knowing how to read these markings, that's exactly how you avoid fatal mistakes, like using the wrong tank for recovery. For example, a standard disposable refrigerant jug is designated as DOT39. That means it's strictly single-use. It is flat-out illegal and incredibly dangerous to refill a DOT39 cylinder because it just isn't designed to hold pressure after it's been emptied. Instead, you've got to use a refillable cylinder. Those are often stamped with DOT4BW400, meaning they're rated for a service pressure of 400 psi, making them fully approved to handle high-pressure refrigerants like R410A.
That brings us to Section 5, Safe Recovery Practices. Let's look at field application.
Now, when you're actually recovering refrigerant, you are not using those standard gray-green tanks we just talked about. Proper recovery cylinders have their very own distinct visual identity. They've got a gray body with a bright yellow top. But listen, visual identity just isn't enough. As a tech, before you ever hook up your gauges, you have got to inspect the physical condition of that tank. If you spot deep rust, corrosion, dents, or gouges, do not use it. Plain and simple, a damaged tank is a weak tank.
Once you've confirmed you've got a safe, properly rated recovery cylinder, you absolutely have to follow the 80% rule. This is, without a doubt, the single most important safety rule in refrigerant recovery. You must never, ever fill a recovery cylinder more than 80% full of liquid refrigerant. Why? Well, because as temperature goes up, liquid refrigerant expands. If you don't have enough empty headspace in that cylinder, the pressure is going to build up to catastrophic levels and literally rupture the tank. The only way to get this right is to find your tare weight, add your safe fill weight, put the whole thing on a high-quality scale, and never let it exceed that number.
And here's something else to keep in mind. These refillable cylinders, they don't last forever. DOT regulations actually mandate that refillable refrigerant cylinders have to be professionally requalified. Usually that means hydrostatic testing every 5 years, so check that date stamped right on the collar. If 5 years have ticked by since that date, the tank is out of compliance and potentially unsafe. Just don't use it until it's been properly retested.
So the really crucial point here is summed up perfectly by Zach Ziegler, the product line manager over at MSA Safety. He points out that not only should technicians ensure they are grabbing the right cylinder, but they also should confirm the refrigerant required in the system, especially with the recent rise of counterfeit refrigerants and these complex new A2L systems. Using a refrigerant analyzer to test a system before you start recovery is quickly becoming an absolute necessity. It's the only way to prevent dangerous mixing and super costly system contamination.
Which really leaves us with this final thought. The rules of the game have changed. The colors have changed. Heck, the refrigerants themselves have changed. So are your cylinder practices truly up to code, or are you still relying on a hazardous color system from the past? Take the extra few seconds to verify the label, read the metal, and always respect the pressure. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and hey, stay safe out there.